Hello, everyone. Forest Focus as Nottingham Forest suffered a Champions League setback against Aston Villa before Manchester City and Chelsea dropped points yesterday. We'll discuss the game at Villa Park, a growing injury list, the future of a couple of players, and the run-ins for the team chasing the top five in the company of, first of all, Mark Sutherns. Morning, Mark. How are you doing?
Morning. Yeah, glad to be back. I've got a few more thoughts on the game. Feeling a bit more philosophical about it, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. For second guest, a big thank you to Darren Fletcher for bailing me out. Gary Birtles had to drop out for a dental emergency at the last minute, so wish Gary well. But Fletch, thank you very much. How are you doing today?
I'm very good. And as I was just saying before we started here, if it was good enough for John O'Hare in the late 70s to come off the bench and replace Birtles, then who am I to deny you the opportunity to put up the number 9 and send me on last minute to save Gaz? Hope you're okay, Gaz. Hope the teeth are fine. I sat at a dinner once with Gaz where his buttons fell off his shirt and 2 of his teeth fell out. So I have the utmost sympathy for the fella this morning that he's back at the dentist. He has terrible trouble with his caps. Not his England caps, his caps. I feel it for him this morning. So I'm only too happy to help. Get well soon, Gaz. Get your teeth sorted out.
That's proper 70s and 80s footballer, definitely. I think that's what happened again, actually. He's having problems with caps. So, yeah, poor Gary.
He's had 2 problems with caps in his life because he never won enough of them either. So now he's reaching the latter stages and he's having trouble with his caps again, which he won't mind me saying.
No, he won't. I'm sure he won't. I'm sure. Kick us off, Fletch, if you would. What did you make of the game at Villa Park on Saturday in general? What are your thoughts?
Do you know what? I might be going against the grain here, but once I heard the full-time whistle go, I was more optimistic of a strong end to the season and a top 5 finish than I was at kickoff. Aston Villa have won 7 top-flight matches 7 matches as a top-flight club for the first time since 1981. They're in their best form as a top-flight side in all competitions since they were crowned champions. So right now, I think this is, if not the most difficult test in the Premier League, based on the form of the team. It's certainly in the top 2 or 3. So Forest go there without either of their recognised strikers, without, I think, the best right-back in the Premier League in terms of consistency all season. And for 15 minutes, they were caught in a hurricane. I mean, I sat there at 2-0 and thought this is going to be Bournemouth all over again. But if you think about the number of big chances created during the course of 90 minutes, Forest were guilty of failing to take enough of them. But they generated enough away from home at Villa Park to make me think that even in circumstances that are less than ideal, they can still compete against the very best teams in the division. So by the time I heard the full-time whistle, I'd gone from being really concerned when the second goal went in to thinking, look, if they can perform like that away at Villa against a good team, with a couple of big injuries, the rest of the season should be fine. So I'm not too concerned. I suspected that they might lose there, but the manner in which the result came about and the strength they showed when they switched it a little bit in the second half gave me real hope for optimism, I must admit.
People watching YouTube will know it's Mark's gone. We knew this was coming. He's got a courier delivery that would come at any time, so it's quite good it's come earlier in the show. One of the things,
disagree with the points I've just made and thought I can't work with this buffoon any longer. It could be that, you know.
5 minutes in, he's had enough. The big talking point going into the game when we saw the team sheet was the striker situation. Then we discussed Taiwo on Saturday. Where do you think this leaves Taiwo, or is it just too early to say because he's only missed 1 match and we don't know what his fitness status is longer term?
Look, I think in terms of Taiwo, he's done everything that Forest needed him to do. He needed to be part of the first 2 seasons, staying in the Premier League. But as a team gets better, the players have to get better. One thing you can't rely on for Taiwo is his fitness, which is always an issue. And I think stepping up next season to be a European team, then they've got to find a way to get more quality into that position. So I think it's the perfect time, the end of this season, to say thank you. He'll always have his place in the hearts of Forest supporters. You can never fault his commitment or his desire, his ambition, his determination. But I just think they've got to find a way to get slightly better at the top end of the pitch. That means they've got to sign somebody. I don't think they'll carry Taiwo as well. And to be honest, there's been a real drop-off this season when he's been on the pitch compared to Chris Wood, just in terms of the tidiness of the play in the final third. So I just kind of think that it's been a relationship that's been really important to the club, but I think it feels like it's run its course. And I think from this point on, the challenge for Ross Wilson, the recruitment team, and everybody else down there is to get a striker that's ready for what they need next season.
Yeah. I'll throw this one to Mark then. He's back and can hear us. Okay. We're just discussing Taiwo, Mark. Fletcher, please know, said the same thing as you, that effectively it's sadly time to let him go at the end of the season. My only worry is who is going to buy him and for what money. I mean, I thought maybe the MLS or the Saudi League or somewhere that is less taxing on his body. Is that a big stumbling block for you, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, most leagues around the world are less taxing on his body than the Premier League. And I think, he's got that reputation in the Bundesliga already. I think there'll be takers. It might be a loan with an agreement to buy, maybe, because of the fitness issues. But I think that, I think it was Fletch some time ago said there's no room for sentiment. And I don't think that's the case. I think that's what we said at the weekend. I think we're going to need all that squad next year if we do qualify for Europe. And that's going to be a vital position that we've got covered. We need maybe should be 3 really players who are able to come in that position, presuming Chris Wood remains, and I'm sure he will. So, yeah, I think that it will be an issue moving him on, but I think that there will be some takers. And, it's such a disappointing. The reason why the frustration is there from the fan base is because he seemed to be edging back to fitness, some sharpness. He was beginning to bully centre-backs again in the appearances we saw recently, and then obviously struck down again. We don't know how serious the injury is, but it's a setback again, and more evidence that the next season, that's probably a player we need to move on.
I think on that, next season, obviously the schedule is going to be even tougher than it is now, and he's struggling to stay fit with the schedule as it is. Yeah. There's going to be more games, recovery time is going to be less. So it's going to be more taxing on a player's body who finds it very difficult to stay fit. I mean, if they were to turn around and say, look, we're only going to get 10 million quid for him, which in the grand scheme of things, when you think about potential Champions League money, Premier League finishing prize money and the television money, is not moving the dial at all. If Forest turn around and say, look, he's going to be number 3 or number 4, then I wouldn't have any problem with him being part of a striker group, because I think I agree with Mark. I mean, they do need depth. At that point, they're only going to go as far as they can score goals in those big competitions. So maybe there's a role for him further down the pecking order, but for him to be considered the second best option to Chris Wood going into next season, where expectations are much higher, the team's developed now to a point where it's significantly better, I just don't think he now fits that particular role. So it's either a case of changing his role or moving on to somebody else. I think you make a really good point. Where does he go? But I also think it makes it easier because they'll be fully aware that he's not exactly going to change anything in terms of bringing in the kind of revenue that would impact anything. It's going to be a relatively modest fee. So I don't necessarily think it would be that much of an issue either way. It's not as if you're turning around and saying, we're going to sell one of the big hitters. We want 80 million for him, but we can only get 40. So that impacts everything we do. This is a guy that you might get 10 million for him. Based on his history, you might not even get that. But as Mark said, it might be a loan with a view too. So it doesn't really matter. And the wages won't be astronomical based on the circumstances of when he signed. So I don't think it's a problem whether he stays or goes. I just think it's the role he has in the squad and where his place is in the pecking order of central strikers that would concern me more than anything, I think.
I was watching Fulham at the weekend, and Rodrigo Muniz, great performance, bullied Van Dijk in that game. And I think what Marco Silva's got at Fulham with Raul Jimenez and Rodrigo Muniz is exactly what we needed this season when we need going forward. 2 centre forwards who can alternate, who are at very similar levels, and that Nuno could bring in and with form, which is exactly what Marco Silva does. He moves those 2 strikers around, and there's not a drop off when one comes in. And with Chris Wood and Awoniyi, we haven't got that. Because Awoniyi could have got to those levels, but the fitness has held him back. And I guess that's where the frustration comes from, where when we needed Taiwo to step up, his body hasn't allowed him to do so. So, yeah, and I think that's what we need to aspire to next season, that kind of pairing where not only you can alternate them in terms of starts, but also you can take Chris Wood off with 20 minutes to go. When we've taken Chris Wood off and Taiwo's come on, you can see the drop-off. And it's unfortunate, and it's not great to see, because that was a player that was so important to us in our early seasons in the Premier League. But yeah, it's time to move on and get that kind of set up for European matches.
I don't know what you guys think, but I think the aim has to be to bring in a starter at centre forward. I know Chris Wood's had a magnificent season, but I think you've got to aspire to be better at that position than you are now. So in an ideal world, as well as Chris has done, you want a situation going into pre-season where you've got a centre forward coming in that's a better centre forward than Chris, that makes your team better, that challenges Chris to keep his place in the team. And if he does do, that's fine. But if he doesn't, you're better. And I think they've got to be prepared now to go out and again, we go back to the sentiment situation, that it's great. Chris has been magnificent, but the owner's very ambitious and the manager's ambitious and the fan base is ambitious. And I know that players are popular, but the only way you get better is to bring in better players. And we've seen that the great teams down the years constantly try and improve. If you got way back when, the last thing you would have thought Brian Clough would have done would be to change the league championship team. But what does he do? He signs Trevor Francis and wins a European Cup. So you've always got to be looking to find the player that's better than the one you've got. It's the only way that your team's going to get better. So I think I read something at the weekend that there are rumours that they'd be interested in someone like a Victor Osimhen. They're even being talked about in the same sentence as Arsenal and people like that for Victor Gyökeres. Now, if a player like that comes in, they're coming to start. So that completely changes the dynamic of the front line. It changes the dynamic of the team, changes the expectation levels for the club. And I would be all for that. And I think everybody in the dressing room would as well, because if they're going to go into the Champions League next season, with all due respect, they've got to get better in certain positions, and they've got to get genuine top-class players to play against genuine top-class players when they play in a competition that's as difficult as that. And I think that will be the mindset down there this season. And I think it's going to be an interesting summer for one or two, based on the fact that money will be available and they will be competitive to sign some of the best players that are going to be available this summer.
Let me ask you a follow-up to that, Fletcher. I was going to ask anyway, because we did our live show, lots of questions on the same line. In fact, one of the questions was Cunha or Delap. Keith asks it here. I did a straw poll of the audience. Would you rather have Cunha for 60 million, Delap for 40 million, which is reported release clauses? The poll was overwhelmingly in Delap's favour, which surprised me. Does that surprise you or not?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a fair poll, because I think you've got two different types of centre forward. You know, Liam Delap is very much a number 9. Harry Kane, as his game develops, he might be able to get involved in dropping a little bit deeper, but he's very much going to lead the line in a Chris Wood way. Cunha, I think, is going to do a lot of his work outside the box, and he's a very, very adaptable forward player. You'll see him pop up on the right, pop up on the left, pop up slightly deeper. So I think in an ideal world, you'd like both of them, because I think in the right forward line, they would complement each other perfectly. You see, you know, Strand Larsen at Wolves, and then there's still a role for Cunha within that team. I know they're struggling, but they dovetail really well. So if you could get the pair of them, then I think you've got utopia, because you've got a lot of opportunity to change things. I did see something at the weekend where they saying Delap's release clause was around 40 million, which I think is extremely reasonable. But again, you're buying a player of potential. With Cunha, you're buying more of a finished article. And you're also buying a player in Cunha who's played in the Champions League. And I think that can't be underestimated. When you go into a competition like that, the experience of it would help others in the dressing room. So I wouldn't be disappointed if they got either of them, because I think they're going to be two of the most sought-after forward players currently playing in the Premier League who are available this summer. So I just think they're different. And I think the only way we could answer that properly is to sit down with Nuno and see how tactically he wants to set his team up next season in big games. And then you would be able to narrow down what kind of forward they're looking for. All roads point to, if the rumours are right, though, that they want more of a Delap type than a Cunha type. If they're being linked with a Gyökeres, an Osimhen, a Delap, they're all very similar, physical, and they can do things at the top end of the pitch that would be different to a Cunha. But I just think it's great to see where the club is, that we're now having a poll to decide whether Forest would sooner sign Liam Delap, maybe the brightest English striking prospect that there is at the moment, maybe the heir apparent to Harry Kane, or Matheus Cunha, who's been one of the most entertaining forwards in the Premier League for the last couple of years. We've come a long way, folks, in a short space of time. If we're arguing over this, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, we'd be laughing at Osimhen and Gyökeres. I think we'd be talking about a Football Manager game we've been playing where we got Forest the Champions League or something. Just before we go to a break, Mark, what do you think about those names specifically, if you want, but the general principle that Fletcher's touching on there about big striker, creative forward, and also profile of player in terms of age and finance? What are you dreaming of?
Yeah, I mean, the profile in terms of age is we want a player who's got a big move in them after they come to us, right? The resale value has got to be there. That's the model. Obviously, with Chris Wood and the way we've played, there's an archetype that we can buy to as well. The role that Chris Wood is playing now is likely be the role that we're looking for a player to come in and fill to another level, as Fletch said earlier. The appeal of Cunha, though, is he's got that X factor. He's got that ability to play across the three positions up top. He's got that ability to score a winner at Anfield or the Etihad. And he's ready now. He can hit the ground running, whereas Delap, still a fledgling in terms of a Premier League player, could have those spells where he goes 5 or 6 games without a goal. I don't see that in Cunha. I see Cunha being a consistent performer. But the other side is that Cunha's got a dark side, of course. That we know his personality on the pitch, off the pitch. There's been some question marks over that. There'll be, when people are voting, who would you want, Delap or Cunha? That'll be in people's minds. It'll be, is he going to be someone who disrupts the dressing room, etc.? Because we know there's a little bit of an edge to him, as we've seen this season. I think Cunha's a better player and would give us more because he can come on in a team with Chris Wood and play off Chris Wood. He can play wide. But I see the sense in going for a Delap-like figure because we need that better player to replace Chris Wood as well. So like Fletch says, it'd be lovely to have both. I think if we sign a Delap, if we sign a Gyökeres, we will also need a player who can give us an X factor off the bench, which we haven't had to this point this season. Jota Silva and Souza aren't measuring up to that, and we need to go up a level for that player. So we need a centre forward, and we need a player who can come on across the front line to do something extra with that centre forward on the pitch, and we don't have that player right now.
My thought would be that if they signed Cunha, then they would still need another one to back up Chris Wood through the middle, because you would still only have one authentic number 9. So it would affect the way you're going to play. And Wolves have obviously had him for a period of time now and feel he's better served playing off a target man. Hence why they spent the money on Strand Larsen last summer, because they didn't feel that Cunha would go and play that role and do it as effectively as he would in a situation where he's more comfortable. I also think as well, it's an interesting point that Mark raises. There is this model at the club where you buy a player, increase the value, there's a sell on at the end of it. I wonder whether this summer they would consider cashing one in to be able to strengthen more areas. Because it's okay saying, look, Forest are in the Champions League and they're being linked with all of these players. There is a finite pot of money that they can use to buy them. Now, I don't know what the target would be in terms of, look, we've got 100 million or whatever it is this summer to buy players with. But if you go and buy a Matheus Cunha for 60, you've not got a great deal of wiggle room then for everybody else. And they would need depth and quality for a Champions League, Premier League campaign. We've seen that with Aston Villa this season. They had to go into January and bring in Rashford, Asensio and Marlon because they just didn't quite have enough. And they brought those players in at a time where their form had dipped. And you were starting to say, well, look, Villa might just peter off to mid-table now. And it's about whether they can have a decent run in either the FA Cup or the Champions League. They bring 3 players like that in, and now they're playing better than they were at any stage of the season. And now we're saying, could they beat PSG? Can they get top 5 on their own? Can they win the FA Cup? So it's made a massive difference. Forest are in that situation too, but probably slightly further behind Villa in that regard because we're at a different stage of the process than they are. So I think that whole ethos is going to be tested this summer. Would you cash in a Murillo, a Gibbs White? What would you do? Which means you could potentially spend more, maybe spend 150 million, 200 million. Then you can buy 2 strikers and you can start to look at other positions too. I think this is the most fascinating summer that Forest have had for a long, long time because they're trying to get themselves ready to play in potentially the Champions. I mean, it's all hinges on the Champions League, of course, but I think then it's going to give us a real insight into how the process works. Because I mean, you'd go out now. What would you say, Mark? You get 70 for Murillo for sure. I would suspect you get the same, if not a fraction more, for Gibbs White. Elliot Anderson's value is higher than it was when he came from Newcastle last summer, and there are others. Hudson-Odoi would bring in good revenue. Elanga, that they offered 50 Newcastle last year, so Lord knows what he's worth now, having had the season that he's had. So you've got a lot of big pieces that have all increased the value. Do you just provide money now and keep it? Or do you think we've got money, but we need to be a little bit more creative because we need to really take a step? I don't know what you do, Mark and Matt, but I'm fascinated to see how they go about it down there this summer.
I think it's different because when we had Brennan was our jewel in the crown, and that was the one asset we could sell, but the interest came from Brentford and Spurs. It was kind of limited. With Murillo and Gibbs White, and even Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, the interest won't be limited. So I think the club will likely keep one of those deals on the table and see what we need to trigger. Like, we'll obviously have irons in the fire, and if 5 or 6 of them look like coming in, I think a Murillo could be sold. But we'll be in an envious position because there'll be a whole queue of clubs looking to pounce on that because of the talent he is and the potential he's got. So it's a very different situation to the Brennan thing where we were under pressure because of PSR. This time we've got all the cards, and we've got some real jokers in the pack in Murillo and Gibbs White in particular. And I think it'll be dependent on what we think we can do. But yes, it might trigger one sale, yeah.
I agree with everything.
Fascinating, Matt, because this is not, and again, you go back to sentiment. I know how determined they are to build a club, not to play in the Champions League next season, but to play in the Champions League next season, the season after, the season after, the season after. They want to find a way to break in permanently into the group of clubs that are constantly trying to play in the Champions League. And to do that, you have to be ruthless, and you have to be ahead of what everybody else is doing. The other side of it is we also don't know, and they've been very good recently at finding gems in Brazil in particular, of bringing them in and polishing them up and making them better. Murillo being the poster boy for that, but you would say similar things about Danilo when he's been fit, etc. So you wonder whether over the course of this season they've been looking into that market as well, and there might be a little bit of that coming as well in terms of this player's got great potential, we'll bring him in, we'll follow the Murillo path, and away we go. So I think they're going to look at this from all sides. I don't think it's just going to be, let's go and buy the most expensive players on the market because that looks great. I think they're going to be very, there's going to be a distinct plan and process into how they do it. But I just don't think at the minute any of us know what that looks like until the dominoes start to fall. And then it's going to be fascinating.
No, I agree with everything that you guys have said. I think to go really big, you have to sell one of them. I'm just looking at the accounts and speaking to people and listening to them. It's like, I hope this isn't a sugar high, and Fletcher's right that we're here year after year, but it feels like a massive window because it could be a one-off where we have to get it right.
All I'm saying, Matt, is that's what they want it to be. I'm not saying that it will be, but that's what they want it to be. And that's what they're planning for. That's the way that Mr. Marinakis views it. That he wants to be in a situation where this team can be challenging season upon season. And he doesn't want this to be an aberration. He wants this to be the norm. So his processes are all geared towards that being the case. The other one I'd just throw at you, and it's not just, I know you want to move it back onto the Villa Mac, but it's not just a case of which players do they sign. They've also got to decide what they want the wage structure to look like at the football club. Because if you start spending 60 million quid on a footballer, you've got to be paying them 150,000 quid a week, potentially plus as well. You've then got a scenario where your big hitters in your own dressing room need to be given pay rises. So the wage structure at the football club, I think, is going to dictate a lot of this. If Mateus Cunha is wanted by 3 or 4 sides, he's probably going to go to the one that's going to pay him the most salary. Now, I don't know what Forest feel about where the wage structure is now and where the wage structure can go to be able to, A, keep their players who are getting better, but B, attract the kind of players that you may well need to be a Champions League team. So I think about Aston Villa. Let's go back to them again. I mean, they're paying decent money to Marcus Rashford, Marco Asensio, Daniel Marlin. These will be on good money, and they've got players of their own that are on decent wages. Now, they've had to go with it, and they have gone with it And that's enabled them to bring in these players in January from some of the biggest clubs in the world. The Forest challenge now is they've gone from zero to where they are in such a short space of time that economics have to be a big factor in there. And we can't just kind of look at names on a page and say, well, I'd sooner have that one over that one. So let's just go and do that, because there's so much more to it. The minute you give one player a massive salary, you're going to have a lot of others knocking on your door saying, well, hang on a second, we're only in this competition because I did X. So now I feel I need to be paid accordingly, which is only fair. But so I think that's another side to it. It's not just how much is there available to buy players with. It's also a case of where do we see the wage structure moving to, based on us now being a European side, potentially a Champions League team. That's another side to it that I'd love to be a fly on the wall when they're having the meetings.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that as well, I mean, obviously Leicester got in a lot of trouble because their wage bill and they didn't sell at the right time. They let Tielemans go for free and stuff like that. And also on Villa, there's reports like they're going to breach. Kieran Maguire said Villa are going to breach PSR, and then you read at the weekend they're going to sell their women's team like Chelsea for 200 million quid or something ridiculous that makes a mockery of the whole PSR nonsense anyway. So, yeah, some cautionary tales to bear in mind there. Right, we shall get back to the Villa game and drill down on a few details. And then obviously we'll talk if Forest actually going to make the Champions League, which kind of predicates that whole conversation. But just before we do that, a word on the Trent Nav from Matt Ford.
Not only have they created something fantastic, where they've created like an identity around a pub that had been there a very long time. They've like given it this new lease of life. That's become an extension of the ground, really, the Big Shed. That he's so funny, man. That advert. And I tell you what, the pies look great. I'm jealous of people who have season tickets. I'm jealous of people who get to go to the Big Shed or the Trent Nav on the regular. I'm just like, man, I just want to sit in that pub all day. I want to drink. I think they had Bass on tap there. 10 pints of Bass, 10 cobs, a pie. Go home to have the best sleep you've ever had.
I want to get down there now. He sells it so well.
Well, it's not a health and safety ad, is it?
That's not a Derby beer. Did they not used to sponsor Derby on the front of the shirts? Fordy needs to slap up the wrist for that.
They did. I'm not sure we should be advertising drink 10 pints of Bass at 10:30 in the morning either. But there you go. There you go. Thanks to Nav anyway. Let's stick briefly with forwards then, Mark, from the Villa game. Jota Silva did himself no harm at all. Is he actually just a striker and not a winger, the more we see of him or not?
Yeah, he's definitely a player who occupies that half space, and he's not a traditional winger by any means, doesn't have that pace, has some trickery and tenacity. He's a player that we brought on wide to kind of help us shore up games this season and cause chaos, win fouls, free kicks, and he's done that job pretty well. He's taken his goals, though, well. And we know in Portugal he did play a central role for periods. He's got a good leap on him. He can finish, as we've seen. I am sceptical as to whether he's going to play a big part next season or if he's going to be in the squad or loaned out. I think his versatility could mean he stays with us and can carry out a role off the bench, filling in for injuries and coming on with like 15, 20 minutes to go, as we've seen. But I don't think he's going to be a starter next season if he stays with the club. And I don't think, we were talking earlier about having 2 or 3 players in that central forward position. He's not going to be one of them. So I think if he stays with us, and I don't think he will, I think he'll be loaned out or sold on, then I think he'll be a squad player playing the kind of role that we're seeing now. I
mean, he's so unstructured. He sort of reminds me of Darwin Núñez in the way he plays. What do you think about him in the short term, Fletch, in terms of maybe we need him to cover Taiwo and Wood, and then also in the long term, especially if Mark's right and he is just really mostly a forward, does he have a long-term future or not, do you think?
I would have said no until the second half on Saturday. And then I can actually see a purpose. And that's the best I've seen him look in a position that I'd never seen him play. And I wonder whether the final few games this season will ultimately decide whether he sticks around or not. I mean, one thing I would say, he's got tremendous enthusiasm and he completely embraced the job that he was given at Villa Park. Whether he's played there before, I don't think any of us know. He does, but I don't think any of us know whether he's ever really been there before. But he thoroughly enjoyed it. He was an absolute nuisance. He got into the ahead of Martinez and one or two others. And he really gave the Villa defenders something to think about. And I also like the fact that he can play on either side. So you can play him now, based on what we've seen, in any of the front three positions. And you need depth. So he's a bit of a Swiss Army knife in terms of what he can do. So I think, again, that makes him a little bit more attractive when you're looking to put a squad together for next season, because they're not going to be the deepest squad anyway. So if you've got a player that can play multiple roles in the team and embrace it the way that he did, then that might give him more of a chance to stick around. And I think if he ends up starting against Everton, with the way he plays, he could give Tarkowski and Branthwaite one or two issues. I mean, they're not the quickest on the turn by any stretch, the two of them. If he was to nick a goal or two at the City ground, having done so well at Villa and taking the goal the way that he did, then he might just be changing one or two people's minds. So I think it's slightly too early to be definitive one way or the other. But I must say, the thing that stood out to me for him on Saturday wasn't necessarily the way that he played, but it was how he went about it. He was completely committed to the cause. He was exactly what the team needed at that stage. And he epitomised, I thought, the togetherness, the unity, the determination within the dressing room to be the best version of themselves at all times. And I thought he was pretty much a poster boy for that on Saturday.
Yeah, it was odd, wasn't it? The substitution, when they made it, I wasn't clear what Nuno had done, because it was a like for like, wasn't it, for Elanga? And I was like, why have we taken off Elanga when he's in red hot form, probably our most dangerous player in transition? And Jota came on and filled the same role, really. But he did a very different job, didn't he? The work rate, and he was holding up the ball, he was linking play, he was wandering across the front line in the same way Elanga does. But arguably, he's perhaps got that more of a striker's instinct, as he showed in the box with the goal. And yeah, he was the catalyst for much of the good stuff in the second half, for sure.
He played like a fella a foot taller when he came on. He played like a number 9, didn't he? I don't know whether Nuno had said to him at half time, "You're taller than you think, you're bigger than you think. Go and get stuck into this lot," because he just went diving in. Brilliant.
He won a header off Mings in the second half, actually. When he outleapt him, I was like, blimey, Mings ain't going to be happy with that. It was class.
He went from Jota Silva to Duncan Ferguson in the space of about 3 seconds.
He is decent in the air, to be fair, certainly. Let's talk about just another player then who... probably the formation as well, who had a rough day, Fletch. I thought Morato, I mean, perhaps you get away with pulling your shin pads up 9 times out of 10 and Rodgers doesn't stick it away, but it's not a good look. I don't think he had a great game. Where are we at with 3 at the back? Is it a problem, or is it just a case of a couple of errors made it look a lot worse than it is?
No, I don't think it's a problem. And I think that it's been very good to Forest, that shape at times this season. So I think it would be wrong to be knee-jerk over half an hour at Villa, who we said right at the top of the podcast today are maybe the form team in the whole country at the moment, and they're capable of scoring goals against anybody. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the shape, because it's worked. And I wouldn't be too concerned about him, because if you're Morato, how many games have you started? How many times have you played in the position that you would consider to be your best position? The answer to both is not very often. It tends to be thrown on as some kind of firefighter when the shit's hitting the fan and they've had to switch from a back 4 to a back 3, and then you're hoping that he can bail you out. So I think until we see him have a run in the team in the Milenkovic position and see how good he is, I think it's too early to really make a distinct judgment, because these players not only need a game in the right position, they need a sequence of games, and he's never had that. So, look, every team's entitled to a bad 15 or 20 minutes. Liverpool had one at Fulham yesterday, but nobody's panicking about that. So, I just think circumstances, Villa's form, an off day for the team, lacking a bit of shape and things like that defensively, but I wouldn't be too worried about it at all. I think that they've had more good games and more good periods of games playing with a back 3 than they've had nightmares like they had at Villa at the weekend. I just think they got caught cold. And if you think about it as well, there's been so many big emotional games for them, emotional moments and emotional times, that it might have been inevitable at some stage that they were going to hit a bit of a flat spot. And maybe that was half an hour at Villa Park. But I go back to the point again. decisive action was taken. Manager changed it. Should have won the game based on the big chances second half. So I'm not too concerned. I've got to be honest.
Just one other point on that, Mark. I was trying to find while Fletcher was talking there about most goals from set pieces this season. Obviously, if we don't have Taiwo, we don't have Chris Wood potentially playing an Everton team who do have at least a reputation for being physical. Or are you almost backed into a corner that you need to have that extra physical presence on Saturday against Everton?
Yeah, possibly. If you remember when we went away to Goodison, we were going to play that formation, and we got a late injury, didn't we? We had to change it up, and Sousa started out on the left. So I think, given that Nuno was going to play free at the back at Goodison, I think it's probably likely, given the situation we got with Aina out, that he'll do that again. And the set piece threat is unquestionably one of Everton's major routes to goals. They have got McNeil back, they have got Ndiaye back, so they've got some creativity, which is bad timing for us because those two players make a hell of a difference to Everton. And McNeil and Ndiaye both came off the bench, I think, at the weekend. So if, one or both of those start, that gives them a lot more craft. So that set pieces aren't their only route to goal. They are going to be dangerous. But I do think, with Beto up top, a very physical presence with the two centre backs that they got from set plays, I wouldn't be surprised to see Morato start again. Whether he plays Toffolo left wing back and Williams right wing back, that
Moreno
might be a better option. Oh, of course, Moreno's back, of course. Yeah, so Moreno will play. Yeah, so I think Nuno kind of sees Moreno more as a wing back now as well, and I think he is. I think he's better going forward than he is defending. It's a lot to try and fill in for Williams and Aina. I think they're two of the best fullbacks in the league this season, based on what we've seen last recent weeks, in particular from Williams. So, yeah, Moreno will play left wing back, and Williams will play right, and I think we'll play three centre backs again. But I think Morato with Williams there is going to be more secure than Morato with an out of position Dominguez at right wing back. So I think that makes a difference. I think if you look at that first goal, Rodgers occupies that space between Dominguez and Morato, and they're both unaware, they're both naive. They don't see the free kick taken quickly, and Tielemans can deliver that ball, and Rodgers has got the quality to do what he did. So we weren't alert. We were naive to that ploy that Villa do quite a bit. They often look for Rodgers on that long ball over in that channel. And that was our weak area of the defence, with Dominguez and Morato in that spot. I don't think we can take too much from that going forward, because once Williams is in that position and we have Moreno or Aina in the side in the back five as well, Morato looks better.
I watched Everton on Saturday. It was our game on TNT Sports, and I'll tell you something now. If they play like that, then Boris won't have an issue. Yes, they've got two tall centre backs, but the delivery from set pieces was appalling, and I mean appalling. At no stage did they threaten Arsenal from either free kicks or corners. At no stage. Everton's issue still is they don't get enough pressure in the final third to generate enough corners and free kicks. So they were very sporadic going forward against an Arsenal team who were thinking about Real Madrid on Tuesday. Should have won the game, Everton, really. I mean, I couldn't believe that they weren't more aggressive themselves. I was disappointed in what I saw. They looked tired. He's not been able to change the team an awful lot, David Moyes, since he's been there. So he's had to play a lot of the players constantly. And I could be proved wrong. I mean, they could turn up at the weekend and look at an entirely different team. But all I would say is if they play like that, like they played against Arsenal, then I wouldn't have any issues anywhere really from a Forest perspective, whether they play with a back four or a back three, because they just didn't have a dominant player really anywhere on the pitch. McNeil got 3 or 4 minutes. So I think he's a long way off from being Dwight McNeil. He's had knee surgery prior to Christmas. This was the first time they'd seen him. And Jai lasted an hour and was blowing, but he didn't look the threat that he looked prior to the injury. Scored a penalty, but didn't really get anything in general play. Jack Harrison is Jack Harrison. Shut the gates at the Trent end, otherwise he's going to run into the river. I just kind of looked at it and I was disappointed. There's energy in there, Decore, Idrissa Gueye, but they looked a relatively straightforward team to contain unless you let the pass in behind to Beto. So that was the time when they were able to turn Arsenal round. They get from back to front relatively quickly. Beto would be the other side of Kivior or Saliba, and then Arsenal had a slight issue. But I mean, you could count the number of saves that David Raya made. I don't know whether it's on one finger or one hand, but they were few and far between. And they were at home against a team that was essentially making loads of changes and taking the afternoon off. So if they turn up like that, then Forest will be fine. Is the point I'm making, because I was really disappointed by what I saw from them on Saturday, based on the improvement in terms of points that they've made under David Moyes.
Just one side point from that. I think I'm right in saying Morato came in at the last. Morato played in a 2 in that game, and he did really well. So I think he had a bad game on Saturday, but I think he's
Matt, the players tell me that in their opinion there is no drop off when he plays.
Yeah.
They feel completely comfortable when he's on the pitch, aggressive. They actually feel that he's unlucky, Morato, this season, that he deserves to play more. But the other two have been that good that you can't take either of them out. So the players certainly feel that he's good enough for what they need, not just as a replacement, but as a starter if needs be. So that would tell you a lot. They're very comfortable with him. And these aren't conversations I've had with a microphone shoved under somebody's nose. These are, chats where they would say, a bit concerned about him. But no, they're very, very happy that he's part of the group and can be whatever they need him to be in the circumstances.
I think we've got a bit of time just to squeeze this in. Just briefly, Fletch, because you did that game, the penalty, I didn't see it, so I've certainly seen the highlights. I don't know what you guys made of it. The penalty and the VAR versus Elliot Anderson and Mitoma's VAR intervention. I don't know if you had any thoughts on just the state of how those decisions were made and how contradictory they were to me. That one was not overturned and one was.
Yeah, I must say with the Anderson one, I'm surprised they overturned it, because I think whatever decision was taken at the time should have stood. I don't think it's a clear and obvious error either way. So if he hadn't given it, I wouldn't expect him to look at the screen and give it. And likewise, when he did give it, I was astounded that they then looked at the screen and took it off. I just thought it was one of those where on-field decisions should stand. The one at Everton was soft, really soft. I think Jack Harrison's pulling Lewis Skelly as much as Lewis Skelly's pulling Harrison. Most of it was done outside the penalty area. I mean, the lesson that Lewis Skelly's learned is don't let the ball bounce. I mean, that was as crazy as Morato fiddling about with his shin pads on Saturday. That was the issue there. But I must say that I was surprised that they didn't have a look at the one at the weekend and say, too soft. So yeah. I just think at the minute, though, they're caught in a fog, the referees. I don't think they know whether to stick or twist. I think there's been a lot of bad decisions. They're under the microscope more than ever before. There's a large proportion of them who I don't think are good enough for the Premier League. And it's being highlighted by the fact that everything's being looked at under a microscope now. So we're seeing their errors. And I think as soon as the whistle gets blown on a match day, they're frightened to death to get it wrong. And I think this is the problem. The system's put doubt in the fella's mind. And he's out there now running around thinking, I'm on a hiding to nothing. I'm bound to get something wrong today. They're all going to be highlighting it. I can't relax. And they end up making a meal of it. 2 or 3 refs have had good seasons. I think the rest of them have really, really struggled. I have no idea what Howard Webb's going to do to sort it out. But it's not getting better. It's getting worse. I mean, 6 minutes for the Tottenham goal to get wiped off the other night. Ange was spot on. If it's a clear and obvious error, it doesn't take 6 minutes to find. So just in the literature that they hand out, they're off piste in that one. I think it's a mess. Tarkovsky, I mean, if the guy can't see that in real time, he shouldn't be reffing. I mean, I don't Christ know how you missed that. So I'm kind of looking at this and thinking, it's been a terrible week again for the referees. But then I'm looking back thinking, when's it been a good week? So yeah, I just think it's getting worse. But that's where I'd stand on those two.
One other side note that we don't have time to discuss. I don't know how we only had 4 minutes added time in our game on Saturday, and then other games. I watched one yesterday and it was like 8, and it was virtually the same circumstances. I think it was Chelsea Brentford or something. But yeah,
Matt, if you try and understand it, mate, you'll drive yourself mad. Absolutely drive yourself mad.
You would. Right. We'll take a break shortly, but we'll look at the run-ins. But just before we do, I'll ask each of the chaps the same question. We've not really discussed injuries, Mark. Elanga, I think Elanga's probably all right by the sound of it. We've said about Taiwo, we've said about Chris Wood, we've said about Aina. We get Moreno back. I think I put on the thumbnail for this, will injuries decide our fate or something like that. Are you worried about injuries, or are you pretty chilled out that we'll get results?
I am worried about obviously with Chris Wood out and Aina out. They're two key protagonists from the season, and should arguably be in the Premier League team of the season as well. They've been working at that level. Yeah, I guess it's the goals. I mean, obviously Elanga stepped up, Hudson-Odoi stepped up, but that's a lot of onus on two players who aren't natural goal scorers, of course, but they've done well recently. I think we've scored 7 goals in 8 games, which is not a great stat. So clearly the issue is at that end of the field. But having said that, we created 15 chances in the second half against the Villa side. So we're capable of creating chances. If we'd have taken another one, we'd have got a point. So I think there's every chance that we can get by, but obviously getting Chris Wood back is the crucial one. Ola is a big loss, but with Morato back and Williams moving to the right side, I think we'll be okay. It might well force 3 at the back, because I've got a feeling that's what Nuno will play with Morato in the side. Whether we go to a back 4 against Everton remains to be seen with Morato there. But yeah, I'm concerned. I don't think we can take 1 or 2 more. I think obviously that we're now down to really an 11 which hasn't really got much depth on the bench that we can bring on. Souza and Jota. And Jota obviously was effective at the weekend. Is he going to start? Possibly. Yeah, I think he will start against Everton. But we don't have much then on the bench to bring on to change a game or to shore it up with Morato and Jota on the pitch. So, yeah, it gives us a lack of options, I think. And that is obviously a bit of a concern over the run-in. But looking at the fixtures, I think we can still be fine. If we can get Wood back in 2 or 3 weeks, or if not before, and if Ola can make the end of the season, then I think we'll be okay. But we certainly can't take too many more.
Yeah, we'll look at fixtures after the break, but just on the injuries, Fletch, what are your thoughts?
Nervous, I think, because you've seen how quickly it can change in this division. I mean, teams can literally fall off a cliff when they start to run out of players. It can change very, very quickly. I think it makes Saturday's game really important. Forest have been really good this season. When they've had a setback, they've been really good at responding, and they've tended to use the City ground to do that. You think back to the 2 defeats against Newcastle and Fulham, and then they came out and put the 7 against Brighton, and then they lose the 2 against Fulham and Newcastle, but then they're ready to go again. So they've been good at that. So it feels like Saturday's important, whoever's on the field, and just to get a win there or do something positive there and keep it rolling, because we are going to talk about the running when we come after the break. A lot of teams are going to play each other. So a lot of teams, you might look at it in a vacuum and say, oh, well, they'll get to 65 points. Well, they won't, because they're playing. If they do, they can't, because they're playing each other. And so there's a lot of games head-to-heads. Where Forest are lucky, they haven't got one now until they play Chelsea on the last day of the season. So Forest head-to-heads are gone. So Forest's destiny is easier to predict than the others. But I also think as well that we've heard a lot and we've seen a lot with our own eyes, the togetherness in the group, the way that Nuno's built the spirit within there. And they play a very, I wouldn't say basic, but they play a very practical way. And they all know what to do. So it's not as if you've got a player coming in and all of a sudden he's got to try and reinvent the wheel, or he's put into a situation that's really awkward and difficult. There's a lot of moving parts in what he's got to do. They're clearly very well coached. They clearly listen to what's said when they're on the training ground, and they all seem to know exactly what they need to do. The shape of the team in and out of possession has been brilliant all season. So I think that gives you a chance when you aren't at full strength to maintain that ability to be a good, sound, solid unit. And I think we'll see that at the weekend. So I'm nervous if they lose any more. But right now, I think it's manageable. I think it's fine. And I think they'll be okay. I just don't think they can lose many more. If they do lose a few more, then they might need 1 or 2 bits of help from elsewhere. But there's enough of a buffer at this stage to feel confident about that as well. I'm still supremely confident that by the time the Champions League starts next season, Forest will be in it. So I'm supremely confident.
we must be supremely confident. We spent about 20 minutes discussing Cunha, Ottoman, Gyökeres, Delap, and all those. So we must have the faith still, certainly. We'll look at the run-ins then, as mentioned, in a few seconds after. This is a treat for you. This global telemetrics ad I've seen. This is like daytime soap TV level acting. So here we go.
Please tell me, please tell me that this is not going to be Donald Trump saying how good the big shed is. What have you got now?
No, this is just global telemetrics and their staff, but they love a bit of amateur dramatics. Here we go.
You're not going to lock that, mate?
No, mate, it's completely safe around here.
You're not going to lock that, mate?
No, mate, it's completely safe around here.
I don't know if car thieves normally drink out of china cups with the pinky rays just before they go and nick your car, but if they do,
you should be on those adverts.
The biggest crime was the wallpaper, I think. Blimey.
I think that's Mike Boynder's actual house there. But yeah, check out Global Telemetrics, links in the description if you want to secure your vehicle anyway. So yeah, thanks for their support. Right, we'll have a look in the final 10 minutes or so at the fixtures. I'll put them up. This isn't the greatest graphic, but I'll leave them up so people can see what we're talking about in terms of who's got what out of the teams that are in the running. I've got Forest, Chelsea, Newcastle, Man City, Villa and Fulham on the screen. And like I say, I know it's not ideal, or I've thrown Fulham in there because I think they might not get in, but they could have a very big deciding factor. Mark, kick us off. Statistically, the algorithms and the bookies have us and City having the easiest run-in. How are you feeling about us and all those teams we're competing with?
Yeah, I mean, Fletcher was right. I think the Everton game's a launch pad, really, because if we can win that game, we go to Spurs, a venue, and against an opponent who are in a state where I think we can get at least a point, and then we go into the home game with Brentford, which will be very tough. They've travelled well recently. But 3 points against Everton will be that launch pad, and that's why it's so important, and I'm very nervous about Saturday's game. If we win that, I think we can get positive results against Spurs and Brentford as well, and then with Leicester to come, that should be enough. The interesting thing about the results, us losing to Villa and Liverpool losing to Fulham, is it activated Villa and Fulham as sides that can still get to that top five. And by doing that, it's brought them in as a factor who could take points off of Newcastle, off of City, off of Chelsea. So I think if you'd have done this a couple of weeks ago, you might have only had 4 teams there. Now, maybe you've had Brighton, but now you've got 6. And I absolutely think that, Villa can take points off Newcastle and City. I absolutely think that Fulham can take something off of Chelsea at home as well, and Villa away. So those combinations of outcomes, if we can do our thing and it's in our hands, I think should be enough to get us top 5. But I think it is, for me, it's all about Saturday. If we can get 3 points, I think from there we take the momentum to the next 2 and do enough.
There's a lot of combinations there, Fletch, involving Chelsea, Newcastle, City, Villa, Fulham, where they all play each other, which is another reason that gives me a lot of confidence. What about you?
Well, I'm looking at that, and 5 of the 6 teams you've got on the screen play Everton. So Everton are going to have a big say in who qualifies for the Champions League. It makes this weekend's game important. Everton have got to play Chelsea, Newcastle, Forest, Manchester City and Fulham. If I look at the list of fixtures there, I still think Fulham are too inconsistent despite beating Liverpool to get a Champions League place. So I would confidently put a line through them. And I look at Chelsea's running. After Ipswich this week, they go to Fulham, Everton at home, Liverpool home, Newcastle away, Man United home, and then Forest. They've got the most difficult set. If they qualify, then I think they've absolutely earned it. But I'm looking at the way Chelsea are playing right now, and I can't see them getting enough points from that sequence of games. I think by doing that very basic process, you're down to 6 teams from 5. Liverpool and Arsenal certainties. And then you've got 3 from Forest, Newcastle, Manchester City, and Aston Villa. And the team that controls its own destiny the most is Forest. They've got a set of fixtures there that if you offered them at the start of the season, they'd have taken. So there can be no complaints. So I think you're looking at you're looking at 6 teams trying to get 5 places, and you might just want to factor in, if Aston Villa get through Paris Saint-Germain, they've got to think about the Champions League. So I'm based on looking at that, it makes me confident. I think if Forest do blow it from here, you'd have to consider them really, really either unfortunate because of injuries or something has gone wrong. Just looking at the games, certainly the home matches, Everton home, they should win. Brentford at home, you'd make them strong favourites. Leicester home, I think us 3 could play against them and at least get a draw. Unless Yannick Vestergaard brings his dog that day, I think they're better when the dog's there. And then, I kind of look at West Ham, and they're not exactly setting the world on fire. They can't score. I think a team as well organised as Forest would certainly feel they could go to West Ham and at least get a draw. So it depends how many points that you actually need. People tend to tell me that once you get to 65, you're a certainty. So, and that's for a top 4. So they're not that far off. I think the beauty of it now is points on the board are worth so much more than games in hand or fitness of squad. I think just having the points is huge. I mean, even this weekend, Forest lost, but no real damage was done, was it? If you look at the table, they've still got a nice cushion. And Manchester City and Chelsea are more concerned about Newcastle right now than they are about Forest. I think you've got to be looking behind you rather than above you. So the psychological aspect of all of this, think about the pressure the City players are under. It's absolutely unthinkable that they would go from being champions to not even playing in the Champions League the year after by not finishing top 5. So they're under massive pressure and are hugely inconsistent. That's a difficult game against Crystal Palace, at the weekend for them. So I think the big question here is how many points realistically do you see the other 5 picking up in the last 7 games, 8 games in Newcastle's case? I think Forest are in a great position, really, really strong.
Yeah, well, having watched Chelsea and Man City yesterday, they didn't show anything to worry me at all. Certainly, Newcastle do play Leicester tonight. Obviously, as Fletch said, we can basically assume as much as you can in football they'll win that one. So I'll ask you each. Forest pressing you now, Fletch. Liverpool, Arsenal, 3 others for you to make it.
Yeah, I would go Liverpool, Arsenal, Forest, Newcastle. And then it's a toss-up for me between Manchester City and Aston Villa. And I think I would go Aston Villa.
Mark?
I would go City. It's the same 4, but with City over Villa, I think. I think
that's the one, Mark. It's going to come down to the last couple of games. Those 2. Yeah. The rest of it. Newcastle are good again. They're still riding this Carabao Cup wave. The Isak thing would be a problem. If he keeps getting hurt, that would be an issue in some of the games I can see that they've got. But I think it's going to come down to City. It could come down to the last weekend, couldn't it? City at home to Fulham and Villa at Man United. Yeah.
I think I would just favour City because Villa have got, Paris Saint-Germain. Obviously, they're both teams in the FA Cup, but I would just favour City. Although watching them yesterday, I mean, talk about an awful game of football where
Let me throw this at you then. So we kind of give it that Villa are going to win at Southampton at the weekend. They're then the next 2 games for them, I think, might well decide it. They've got Newcastle at home, so somebody's got to drop points there, or both, and then Man City away. Now, you're both saying Man City. If Villa win at the Etihad, you'd both be changing your mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Right now, if I said to you, if they were going to play tonight, I'd favour Villa right now. In a bubble, I'd favour Villa to beat City, home or away right now.
Yeah, good point. I'm just checking one thing that, City are away on the last day. Actually, there's an error on that graphic. Thanks
right. So there you go. There you go then. So that's 2 away games and 2 tricky ones for the 2 teams that we think it's going to come down to. City at Craven Cottage and Villa at Man United.
Well, it's looking like a tense final day. I just hope we're a bit player in that scenario and we don't need anything out of Chelsea because I want a party at the Nav for the Chelsea game. I do not want a tense final day.
Let's hope for a start on telly that day because that means there's nothing on it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Don't be a
Yeah.
TV pick on the last day because that means you're in. You're fine.
Well,
Yeah.
Chelsea will want us to be in it. We'll give them a good chance, potentially. Right. If you've enjoyed that, just before we go to final thoughts, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, do consider membership or Patreon, or just give us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify would be lovely. Thank you very much. Fletch, again, thanks for stepping in at last minute. Anything you want to add before we go?
No, just hope Gaz is okay. The dentist done him proud. We can't have our double European Cup winner in any form of distress because we all love him so much.
Very true. Very true. Mark, anything from you before we go?
I just want on the Villa performance. I just want to say that we've got to be positive and hugely positive for that second half, because when you look at it, we went in 2-0 down, and not long ago, we'd have thought, well, that's game over, and maybe it's going to be 3, maybe 4, maybe it's going to be a Bournemouth scenario. Instead of that, we turned it completely around and dominated the second half and could have got something from the game. So the fact that even with the injuries, Nuno was able to activate that kind of performance with his halftime talk and his halftime tweaks, that should give us a lot of positivity going into the Everton game, which is huge. If we win that, I think it's done. I think we'll be okay.
Do you know what, though? I had people say to me after the Manchester United match, we've won that. Okay, now. And then Villa pops up. Oh, need to beat Everton. This is going to be a ride. Make sure the seatbelts are fastened, I'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it's like to be a football fan, certainly. Right, we'll be back. I think tomorrow evening is the plan with Greg. We'll do a fan phone in. I'm going to speak to Seb Hutchinson in an hour. So he'll be our interview on Wednesday, and then Thursday match preview. And Friday should be opposition preview. So busy week ahead. Do join us that if you can. Mark Sutherns, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Fletch.
Top man.
Darren Fletcher, thank you very much.
Thank you, mate, as always.
Good to have you with us. Good to have the company of everyone on as well. Do us a favour, hit like before you go. If you would, that'd be great. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.